A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Alright. Today's prompt from Daniel is about a situation that is unfolding as we speak. He's asking about the mechanics of surviving behind enemy lines after a shoot-down, specifically in the context of the American pilot currently on the ground in Iran. It is the absolute nightmare scenario for any aviator, and honestly, the technical and psychological hurdles involved in a rescue like this are just staggering.
It really is a race against entropy, Corn. And just to put it out there, Herman Poppleberry here, ready to dive into the weeds because this isn't just a story about a missing person. It's a story about a massive, multi-billion-dollar infrastructure that exists for the sole purpose of retrieving a single human being from the most hostile environment imaginable. By the way, fun fact for everyone listening, today's episode is actually being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash.
Well, hopefully Gemini has better navigation skills than that pilot's GPS did. I mean, we're looking at a situation where an F-35 or an F-15E went down near Tehran. That is not exactly a friendly neighborhood for a stroll. Secretary Hegseth was just saying we had control of the skies, and then boom, reality catches up. It's a massive psychological blow, but for the person in the cockpit, the politics don't matter. The only thing that matters is what happens the second that canopy blows, and they're hanging under a parachute.
That transition is violent, Corn. People think of ejecting as just pushing a button and floating down, but it's an explosion underneath your seat that subjects your body to 20 Gs. You are likely injured, disoriented, and you are descending into a country that has been at war with yours for 5 weeks. The moment that pilot hits the ground, a clock starts ticking. In the search and rescue world, we talk about the golden hour. If you can't get them in the first 60 minutes, the statistical probability of a successful recovery drops off a cliff because the enemy is triangulating the crash site just as fast as we are.
So, let's talk about that first hour. Daniel mentioned the training these guys go through, the SURI program, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. I've heard stories about SURI school being the most miserable 2 or 3 weeks of a pilot's life, and that's when it's just practice. What are they actually doing the moment their boots touch Iranian soil?
The very first thing is what they call hole up and heal. If you've just ejected, you're probably bleeding, you might have a compressed spine, and you're definitely in shock. The instinct is to run, but SEER training teaches you to get away from the immediate parachute landing fall area, find deep cover, and assess. You have to hide that parachute. If a bright white and orange silk sheet is draped over a bush, you're done. You bury it, you move to a hide site, and you start the communication protocol.
And that's where the tech comes in. They aren't just shouting for help. They have these survival radios, the PRC-112 or the newer versions. How do those work without every Iranian radio tower within 100 miles picking up the signal and saying, "Hey, the American is right here"?
That is the genius of modern combat search and rescue, or CSAR. These radios use what's called burst transmission. Instead of a constant "help me" signal, the pilot presses a button and the radio sends a tiny millisecond-long packet of encrypted data. It contains their GPS coordinates and a unique identifier. Because it's so short and encrypted, it looks like background noise to most standard scanners. It's specifically designed to be picked up by overhead assets like an RC-135 rivet joint or an E-3 Sentry, which are orbiting hundreds of miles away.
So it's like a digital flare that only your friends can see. But Iran isn't exactly a low-tech backwater. They've got sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities. Can they spoof those signals or jam them?
They certainly try. This is why the evasion part of Siri is so critical. The pilot isn't just sitting there waiting for a helicopter. They are moving, but they're moving with extreme intentionality. They move only at night. They avoid what SEER instructors call lines of drift. If you see a path, a road, a dry creek bed, or a ridgeline, you stay away from it. Why? Because that's where people go. If you're a local militia or a search party, you're going to walk the easy path. The pilot has to walk through the thorns, the mud, and the steepest terrain because that's the only place the enemy won't look.
I love the idea of lines of drift. It's basically, don't be predictable. But we're talking about southwestern Iran here. It's not all empty desert. There are people everywhere. Daniel noted that if this happened near a populated area like Tehran, evasion becomes almost impossible because of human senses.
Well, not exactly, but you're right. The density of the population is the biggest threat. In a desert, you're worried about heat and water. In a semi-urban environment, you're worried about a shepherd, a kid playing outside, or a farmer. If one person sees you, the word spreads through the local village in minutes. This is why pilots carry a blood chit. It's a piece of cloth with the American flag and a message in Farsi that basically says, I am an American. If you help me and keep me safe, the US government will reward you. It's a gamble. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just tells the person exactly who to call to get a different kind of reward from their own government.
It's a literal get-out-of-jail-free card that costs a few $1,000,000 in taxpayer money if it actually gets used. But let's say the pilot manages to stay hidden. They've sent their burst transmission. The coordinates are verified. No, the cavalry has to come in. This is the part that fascinates me, because you don't just send a slow-moving helicopter into the most heavily defended airspace in the world without a plan. Who are these pararescuemen Daniel mentioned?
The PJs. These guys are the only elite force in the entire Department of Defense that is specifically trained for this one mission, personnel recovery. They are essentially a mix of a Navy SEAL, an elite mountain climber, and a trauma surgeon. Their motto is, that others may live, and they take it incredibly seriously. If a pilot is down, the PJs are the ones who go down the hoist or jump out of the plane to get them.
And they're riding in the new HH-60W Jolly Green 2, right? I remember reading about those. They're basically Blackhawks on steroids.
They are. The Jolly Green 2 is a marvel. It's got double the fuel capacity of the older models, which is crucial for deep penetration missions into Iran. If you're flying from a carrier or a base in a neighboring country, you need that range. It's also packed with defensive suites. We're talking about missile warning systems, chaff, flares, and directional infrared countermeasures to blind heat-seeking missiles. But even with all that tech, a helicopter is still a big, loud, slow target.
Which is why they don't go alone. They have the Sandy pilots. I love that call sign. It sounds so friendly for guys who are literally there to rain hell on anyone trying to touch the survivor.
The Sandy mission is usually handled by A-10 Warthogs or F-15Es. Their job is rescue escort. They loiter over the survivor's position and act as the eyes and ears for the helicopters. If an Iranian ground team starts closing in on the pilot, the Sandy pilots are authorized to use whatever force is necessary to keep that perimeter clear. They also act as the communication bridge. The pilot on the ground might not be able to reach a base 1,000 miles away, but they can reach a jet orbiting 5,000 feet above them.
It's this massive layers of the onion approach. You've got the pilot at the center, hiding in a bush. Above him, the A-10s. Above them, maybe some F-22s providing air-to-air cover so the A-10s don't get jumped. Then you've got the HC-130J Combat King tankers circling just outside the danger zone to keep the helicopters fueled. It's an incredibly expensive, incredibly complex stance.
It's the ultimate expression of the value the U.S. military places on an individual life. We will risk 100 lives and $1 billion in equipment to save one person, and that has a huge effect on pilot morale. If you know that this entire machine will roar to life the second you punch out, you're much more likely to fly the mission with the necessary aggression. But in Iran, the challenge is the SAM network. Iran has spent decades buying and building sophisticated surface-to-air missiles like the S-300. Pushing a rescue package through that is a gamble every single time.
You mentioned the golden hour earlier. What happens if they miss it? Press TV is already claiming they captured the pilot. If that's true, the mission shifts from search and rescue to tactical recovery, or potentially a long-term diplomatic nightmare.
If they're captured, the resistance part of SEER kicks in. Pilots are trained in how to handle interrogations, how to give up just enough information to keep themselves alive without compromising the mission, and how to look for escape opportunities. But capture is the worst-case scenario. The goal is to get them before they ever see an enemy soldier. There's a psychological aspect for the rescuer too. The PJs know that every minute they spend in Iranian airspace increases the chance that they'll become the next person needing a rescue.
It's that tension between speed and stealth. You want to get in there fast because of the golden hour, but if you go too fast and too loud, you get shot down yourself. I'm curious about the urban evasion bit again. If you're a pilot and you land in a suburban area, what do you even do? You can't exactly deep hide in a backyard.
You look for transitional spaces. Construction sites, abandoned buildings, or even sewage systems. It sounds disgusting, but the goal is to be where no one wants to be. SEER training actually includes urban evasion modules where they teach you how to blend in. You ditch the bright green flight suit if you can. You use a civilianized kit if you have one, maybe a plain jacket or a hat. But let's be real, an American pilot in the middle of an Iranian city is going to stick out like a sore thumb regardless of what they're wearing. Their best bet is to find a dark corner and stay absolutely still until the extraction team arrives.
And the extraction itself, that's not exactly a quiet affair. A Jolly Green 2 coming into a hover is like a hurricane in a bottle. The dust, the noise, the downwash. It's a giant, here we are sign.
That's why the PJs are so fast. They want to be on the ground for less than 2 minutes. The helicopter comes in, the PJ's fast rope or the hoist comes down, they grab the survivor, verify their identity with a challenge and response, password, and they are gone. They don't linger. They don't do a victory lap. They are at maximum power, staying as low to the ground as possible. What we call nap of the earth, flying to stay under the radar.
I remember you talking about nap of the earth in a previous life. It's basically flying solo, you're dodging power lines and trees. In a place like Iran, with its mountainous terrain, that's incredibly dangerous, especially at night using night vision goggles.
It's white-knuckle flying. You're essentially trusting your terrain-following radar and your own eyes to make sure a mountain doesn't suddenly appear in front of you, but it's the only way to survive. If you pop up to 500 feet, you're a target for every radar-guided missile in the region. The courage it takes to fly those missions is just off the charts.
So, we've got this pilot on the ground. They're using their burst radio. The PJs are spooling up. The Sandy pilots are overhead. What's the success rate for something like this in a contested environment? I mean, we saw the O'Grady rescue in Bosnia back in the 90s, which was a success. But Iran in 2026 is a different beast entirely.
It's much harder now. The proliferation of drones and cheap thermal imaging means the pilot is much easier to find from the air, and the rescue helicopters are easier to track from the ground. In the 90s, if you were in the woods at night, you were invisible. Now, an Iranian drone with a thermal camera can see your heat signature through the trees. The technological edge we used to have is shrinking. That's why the coordination between the different layers of the rescue mission is more important than ever. You need your own drones to hunt the enemy drones that are hunting your pilot. It's a meta-war happening over a single patch of dirt.
It really highlights how much has changed. The weirdness of the prompt isn't just the nightmare of being shot down, it's the incredible complexity of the response. It's not just send a chopper, it's initiate a multi-domain electromagnetic and kinetic operation to secure a 60 square foot area of the Earth's surface for 5 minutes.
That is a perfect way to describe it. It's a surgical strike where the goal isn't to destroy something, but to retrieve something. And the something is a human being with a family, like Daniel's son Ezra or his wife Hannah. That's what's at stake. When you realize that the person in that bush is a father or a son, the effort makes sense.
It's interesting you mention that, because I think people often forget the human element in all this high-tech talk. We're discussing GPS bursts and infrared countermeasures, but for that pilot, it's about the next breath, the next footstep, and the hope that they'll see their family again. That psychological resilience is something you can't really engineer. SEER training tries to simulate it, but you don't know if you have it until you're actually there.
They call it the will to survive. In SEER school, they put you in a mock POW camp, they deprive you of sleep, they make you stay in stress positions, and they interrogate you. They're trying to find your breaking point in a controlled environment so that if you ever hit it in the real world, you've already been there. You know that you can endure more than your brain is telling you. It's about building a mental architecture that can withstand the weight of absolute isolation.
And the isolation must be the hardest part. You're in a country where everyone is looking for you. You're alone, you're hurt, and your only link to the outside world is a little plastic box that might not even be working. It's the ultimate test of the human spirit.
And let's not forget the resistance phase if they are captured. If the press TV reports are true and the pilot has been taken, the mission changes completely. Then it becomes a game of high-stakes diplomacy and potentially special operations to find out where they're being held. We've seen this play out before and it rarely ends quickly. The goal of the Iranian government would be to use that pilot as a bargaining chip, a trophy to show they can stand up to the US air power.
Which is exactly why the US is so desperate to get them before that happens. If you can snatch them out of the desert before the first Iranian soldier arrives, the story is US. Rescue mission a success. If they get captured, the story is American pilot, paraded on state TV. The stakes couldn't be higher, both for the individual and for the nation.
It's a race between two very different machines. One is a massive, slow-moving state bureaucracy trying to find a needle in a haystack, and the other is a high-speed, high-tech rescue force trying to grab that needle before the haystack gets burned down. The technical details of how they do that, the triangulation of signals, the suppression of enemy air defenses, the precision flying. It's all just a means to an end.
I think one thing that often gets overlooked is the role of the human sensor in reverse. We talked about civilians spotting the pilot, but what about the pilot spotting the rescuers? In Siri training, they teach you how to use a signal mirror. It seems so low-tech compared to everything else we've talked about, but a flash of sunlight can be seen for 20 miles.
It's the ultimate backup. If your radio battery dies, or if the electronics are being jammed, a piece of glass in the sun can save your life. There's something poetic about that. Amidst all this 21st century warfare, a technique used by ancient civilizations is still part of the curriculum for an F-35 pilot. It's about having layers of redundancy from the most advanced satellite communication to a simple mirror.
It's the same with the blood shit we mentioned. It's a piece of cloth. It doesn't need batteries, it doesn't need a signal. It just relies on the basic human motivation of self-interest or compassion. It's a reminder that even in the most technical environments, the human element is the final variable.
So, what's the takeaway for us? I think it's the realization that survival isn't a passive act. It's a highly disciplined, technically supported, and psychologically grueling process. When we see a headline about a downed pilot, we shouldn't just think, oh, they're missing. We should think about the massive, invisible machine that is currently vibrating with activity to bring them home.
And the fact that this is happening right now, as we're sitting here. There's a person in Iran, right this second, who is leaning on every second of that SEER training. They're checking their radio, they're watching the ridgeline, and they're waiting for the sound of those jolly green rotors. It's a sobering thought.
It really is. And it makes you appreciate the people who choose that life. Not just the pilots, but the PJs who go in to get them. They know exactly what they're flying into, and they do it anyway. That others may live isn't just a catchy slogan. It's a commitment to put your own life on the line for someone you've probably never met.
It's a hell of a mission, and it's a hell of a topic for a prompt. Daniel always manages to find the things that are both technically fascinating and deeply human. I think we've covered the how and the who pretty thoroughly, but the what happens next is still being written in the skies over Iran.
We'll be watching. The next 48 hours are going to be critical. If that pilot is still evading, their chances are still good. But as the golden hour turns into the golden day, the pressure on the CSAR teams is only going to increase.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap this one up. We've gone from ejection seats to burst transmissions to the PJs, and it's clear that there is no easy part of this process. It's all high stakes, all the time.
Before we go, we should probably do the housekeeping. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show. We couldn't do these deep dives without that kind of support.
If you're finding these explorations as interesting as we are, do us a favor and leave a review on your podcast app. It actually really helps other people find the show, and we appreciate the feedback. You can also find us at myweirdprompts.com for the RSS feed and all the other ways to subscribe.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We'll be back with another one soon, hopefully with some good news about that pilot.
Stay safe out there, and maybe keep a signal mirror in your pocket, just in case. See ya.
Goodbye.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth.